The streetlights hum softly in the quiet suburban night, their pale glow reflecting off the neat, cookie-cutter houses lined up in perfect symmetry. The air is thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and privilege. It's the kind of neighborhood where everything looks perfect on the surface, where people smile just enough to be polite but never long enough to be genuine. I pull into my driveway, exhaling as I glance at the house. It's beautiful. A two-story colonial with a blue door and white shutters. Exactly the kind of home I dreamed of providing for my family. Inside, my wife, Carmen, is setting the table while my son, Malik, is curled up on the couch, his oxygen tank quietly hissing beside him. Malik was born with severe asthma. The kind that doesn't just mean a puffer in his pocket. It means late-night ER visits, specialist appointments, and a constant, gnawing fear in my chest every time he struggles to breathe. The oxygen machine in his room is his lifeline, a necessary evil that keeps him stable in a world that doesn't care about kids like him. I step inside, shrugging off the tension of the day. "Hey, champ," I say, ruffling Malik's hair. He grins up at me. "Hey, Dad, did you see? Mom made spaghetti." Carmen rolls her eyes playfully. "Your son has officially declared spaghetti the best meal in the world. Everything else is irrelevant." I laugh, dropping my keys onto the counter. It's a good night, a normal night. Then the power flickers. For a second, it's just a glitch, nothing more than a quick blink of the lights. But then, it happens again. This time, the entire house goes dark. A sharp, mechanical click echoes from Malik's oxygen concentrator. Silence. I freeze. The hair on my arms stands up. Then, a wheeze. Soft at first, then louder. "Daddy." Malik's voice is tight, his small hands clawing at his throat. His body curls inward as he gasps for air, his chest rising and falling too fast. I'm already moving. I sprint to the backup tank near the couch, hands shaking as I twist the valve. The hissing sound returns. Malik gulps in the fresh oxygen, his body trembling. Carmen clutches my arm, her face pale. What the hell just happened? I don't know, but I'm about to find out. Outside, a few porch lights are still on. Some houses remain lit while others are dark like ours. I check the breaker. Nothing's tripped. Then I see it. A letter taped to our front door. HOA notice. NON compliance. Beneath it, in smaller print, due to unpaid fines, the homeowner's electrical service has been temporarily disconnected per HOA regulations. Please contact us for reinstatement. My stomach drops. My fists clench. The homeowners association. I should have known. I clutch the letter in my hands, my pulse hammering in my ears. Unpaid fines? That's a lie. I know for a fact I paid the last HOA dues on time. Behind me, Carmen steadies Malik, her fingers stroking his back as he gulps in slow, measured breaths. His little chest rises and falls too fast, but at least the oxygen is flowing again. I turn, jaw tight. Stay with him. I need to handle this. Outside, the night is eerily calm. The manicured lawns and pastel-colored houses bathed in the glow of streetlights. The kind of neighborhood where problems like this aren't supposed to happen, at least not to the right kind of people. I march straight to the HOA president's house. Linda Fairfield. Her home sits at the end of the cul-de-sac, bigger than the rest, with a sprawling wraparound porch and an American flag fluttering in the breeze. The lights are still on inside. I pound on the door. Seconds pass before it swings open, revealing Linda herself, impeccably dressed in a silk robe, a glass of red wine in one manicured hand. Her expression barely masks her annoyance, but the fake smile comes quick. "Daniel," she says, tilting her head. "It's a little late for a house call, don't you think? My son almost died tonight." I snap. His oxygen concentrator shut off because of this. I shove the letter in her face. Linda barely glances at it. "Oh dear, that's so unfortunate." Her tone is syrupy, laced with something smug. "Don't play games with me," I growl. "I paid my dues. This is illegal." Linda sips her wine, unfazed. "There were additional fines, Daniel. Unapproved lawn decorations, a garbage can left out too long. Small things, but the rules apply to everyone. She gives a slow, pointed glance at my hoodie and work boots, then back to my face. The message is clear. Everyone except people like me. I grit my teeth. You cut my power over some made-up violations? She sighs, exasperated. I didn't cut anything, Daniel. The HOA simply has an agreement with the utility company. If fines aren't paid, services are interrupted until compliance is met. Standard procedure. Standard procedure. For a heartbeat, I see red. My son was choking on thin air, and she calls it procedure, like we're just a line item in her rulebook. I take a step closer. Turn it back on. Now. Linda doesn't flinch. Instead, she takes another slow sip of wine, then smirks. I'm afraid I can't do that. Regulations and all. A flicker of something cold and satisfied gleams in her eyes. She wanted this. I take a deep breath, forcing my hands to unclench. I don't have proof yet, but I know one thing for sure. This wasn't about fines. This was personal. The next morning, I'm at City Hall the minute they open. I slam the paperwork on the clerk's desk. I need to see a record of fines for my property. The woman behind the desk, middle-aged, glasses perched on her nose, barely looks up. If it's an HOA issue, sir, you'll have to speak with them directly. I exhale sharply. That's the problem. They're making up violations to cut my power. I paid my dues, and now my son, who needs medical equipment, was put at risk. That makes her pause. She looks at me, then at the papers. Name: Daniel Carter, 145 West Haven Drive. Her fingers fly over the keyboard. A few seconds later, she frowns. That's strange. The system shows no unpaid fines. I lean forward. Exactly. She hesitates, then lowers her voice. The HOA submits fine records monthly. If you weren't notified properly, that's a violation on their end. But you didn't hear that from me. I nod. Can I get a copy of that report? She glances over her shoulder, then prints it. I snatch the pages and leave before anyone can stop me. I know Linda won't listen, so I go straight to Martin Reynolds, the HOA's treasurer. Unlike Linda, Martin isn't old money. He's a middle manager at an accounting firm, a numbers guy. And numbers don't lie. When he opens the door, he looks surprised to see me. Daniel, I don't waste time. I need to see the HOA's financial records. Now. He blinks. That's, I can't just give you. I thrust the City Hall report at him. Then explain this. Your records claim I owe fines. The city says I don't. He frowns, scanning the page. Then his face pales. This doesn't match the HOA's internal records. No kidding. He shifts uneasily. Look, Linda handles most of the violations and payments. If there's an issue, I can ask her. No, I say firmly. You check the records yourself. Martin hesitates, but after a long silence, he nods. Give me an hour. When Martin calls, his voice is tight with nerves. Daniel, you were right. I grip the phone. How bad? She's been targeting certain homeowners, selectively increasing fines, adding violations that don't exist. And it's not just you. My stomach knots. Who else? He sighs. Mostly families of color. Single mothers, immigrants, people who can't fight back. The words punch through me like a fist. I knew Linda had it out for me. But this is systemic. Martin hesitates. Daniel, I could lose my position for telling you this. I shake my head. Not if we take her down together. I gather my neighbors that night. We meet at my house, the air buzzing with quiet anger. James and Celeste Hernandez, a Latino couple. Mrs. Patel, an elderly Indian woman who's been fined for lawn maintenance despite having a gardener. Marcus Williams, a black man who's been threatened with foreclosure over excessive noise complaints. Even though he works night shifts, they all have the same story. I lay out the proof, the altered records, the pattern, the deception. James slams his fist on the table. She's been robbing us blind. Mrs. Patel's voice shakes. And we've been paying. Because we thought we had to. Carmen grips my hand. So what do we do? I take a deep breath. We fight. The next morning, we storm the HOA meeting. Linda sits at the head of the table, sipping coffee, exuding smug confidence, until Martin steps forward and hands out copies of the real financial records. The room shifts. Murmurs turn to gasps. Board members glance at each other. They see it now. Linda's smile falters, but she leans back, voice dripping with condescension. These are baseless accusations. Martin isn't qualified to audit our finances. Martin glares at her. I handle the books, Linda. I know fraud when I see it. Her eyes flash. She's losing control. I step forward. You cut my power. You endangered my son's life. You've been exploiting families for years. I hold up my phone. And we have the receipts. A camera flashes in the crowd. Someone's recording. Linda's face twists. You don't belong in this community, Daniel. The room goes silent. There it is. The truth. And now she can't hide from it. Linda leans back in her chair, crossing her arms as if she owns the room. Her smirk is sharp, confident. She still thinks she's in control. Daniel, let's not turn this into a spectacle, she says, her voice dripping with artificial patience. I understand you're upset, but accusations like these, well, they can have consequences. I don't blink. The only one facing consequences today is you. The HOA board shifts uncomfortably. Martin, still clutching the real financial records, clears his throat. I've reviewed everything. The numbers don't lie. The discrepancies match up with complaints from multiple homeowners, many of whom are here tonight. Linda waves a manicured hand. Please, this is a witch hunt orchestrated by a handful of disgruntled homeowners. These fines were issued fairly. If you people, she catches herself, eyes flicking toward me, James and Marcus, then corrects. If residents feel wronged, they should have followed the appeal process. I let the words settle. You people. She slips up when she's rattled. And right now, she's terrified. I step forward, keeping my voice steady. Linda, you didn't just fine people unfairly. You cut my power. You put my son's life at risk. And you did it knowing he relies on oxygen. Some of the board members murmur in shock. Linda rolls her eyes. Oh, stop the dramatics, Daniel. If your son is so fragile, maybe you should have had a backup generator. A collective gasp ripples through the room. My fists clench at my sides, but I don't take the bait. Instead, I take out my phone, tap the screen, and hit play. Linda's voice crackles to life over the speakers. You don't belong in this community, Daniel. The room freezes. The recording plays again, louder. Linda's smirk vanishes. Her face drains of color. Someone in the back whispers, "She really said that?" I turn to the room. This isn't just about fines. Linda has been selectively targeting people like me, like us. And when I confronted her about my son's oxygen, she had no remorse. She enjoyed the power she had over us. James steps forward, holding up copies of the fraudulent fines. She's been running a racket, charging us extra while her friends get a free pass. Marcus speaks next, his voice steady but furious. And when we questioned it, we got threatened with foreclosure, notices, legal action. The board members shift uncomfortably. One of them, a gray-haired woman named Marcia, glares at Linda. Is this true? Linda's mask cracks. This is being taken completely out of context. Then let's see the full records, I challenge. Not just the ones Martin pulled, but every violation, every fine, every waiver you've given your friends. If you're innocent, you have nothing to hide. Linda falters. Then, she does exactly what I expect. She snaps. You think you can come into our neighborhood and turn it into some cheap lawsuit circus? You're lucky we even let you stay here. The silence is deafening. Linda realizes too late what she said. Phones are out. People are recording. The weight of her words suffocates the room. And just like that, she's finished. The room is silent, thick with tension. Linda's words still hang in the air, her voice having betrayed her worst instincts. We let you stay here. She knows it too. Her expression twists. Shock, then fury, then a cold, calculating gleam as she scrambles to regain control. That recording is illegal, she snaps, pointing at me. You can't just record someone without their consent. I fold my arms. Actually, I can. Our state is a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation knows it's being recorded, it's legal. The realization hits her like a slap. She sways for a moment, then juts her chin out. So what? You think a few recordings will change anything? I run this HOA, Daniel. I have connections. Lawyers. The board will back me. I won't. Martin interrupts. She whips around to face him. Excuse me? Martin squares his shoulders. I ran the numbers, Linda. Everything Daniel said checks out. He turns to the rest of the board. She's been doctoring violations, pocketing excess fines, charging some homeowners and letting others slide. That's fraud. A ripple of murmurs. Marcia, the elderly board member, frowns deeply. Linda, is this true? Linda's jaw tightens. She opens her mouth, then stops. She has no defense. Still, she tries. Martin, she says sweetly, stepping toward him. Let's not be hasty. You and I have worked together for years. We can fix this. These people are just looking for a handout. Enough. The voice cuts through the air like a gunshot. Everyone turns. At the back of the room, a woman steps forward. Tall, poised, and furious. Karen Holt, County Commissioner. Linda's face drains of color. Commissioner Holt crosses her arms. I received an anonymous tip about HOA corruption in this neighborhood. She flicks her gaze toward me. I assume that was you? I nod. She holds up a folder. We pulled public records. Dozens of complaints. Families being pushed into foreclosure over fraudulent fines. HOA funds mysteriously misallocated. Linda, do you know what this is? Linda shakes her head, lips pressed thin. It's an audit. The color returns to Linda's face, bright red. This time. You can't just waltz in here and… Karen doesn't let her finish. Actually, I can. See, your little scam stopped being an HOA issue the moment you started messing with utility access. That's tampering with public infrastructure. Cutting power to someone's home, especially when there's a medical condition involved. That's criminal negligence. Linda stumbles back. I didn't know. I step forward, voice razor sharp. You didn't care. More murmurs. Some board members are now openly glaring at her. Karen hands a second folder to a uniformed officer standing behind her. Sergeant Parker, do you see enough here for an arrest? The officer flips through the documents. His lips press into a hard line. Yes, ma'am. He steps forward. Linda panics. She spins to the board. You can't let them do this. I built this HOA. I made this neighborhood desirable. If we let people like him… She catches herself too late. Sergeant Parker nods. That's enough. The handcuffs snap around her wrists. She screams. You can't do this to me. I'm the HOA president. Karen levels her with an icy stare. Not anymore. Linda struggles, but it's useless. The board has turned their backs. The neighbors are filming. As the officer drags her away, she locks eyes with me. There's no power left in them. No control. Just cold, bitter hate. You'll regret this, Carter, she hisses. I lean in, voice low and calm. No, Linda. I'll be celebrating this. The door slams behind her. And just like that, she's gone. The video of Linda's arrest goes viral. Neighbors share it. News stations pick it up. HOA president arrested for targeting families of color. Flashes across screens. The comments online are brutal. Entitled Karen gets what she deserves. Cutting a child's oxygen? Lock her up. This is why HOAs are the worst. Linda's carefully curated reputation, her power, disintegrates overnight. The fallout is swift. The county seizes HOA records. Investigators uncover years of financial misconduct. Misused funds. Fake fines. Fraudulent liens. Linda isn't just facing one charge. She's facing dozens. Her assets are frozen. Her husband files for divorce. She tries to sell her house, but no buyer will touch it. And the board? They unanimously vote to strip her of her position. Marcia, the elderly board member, steps down. I should have seen it sooner, she tells me, eyes heavy with regret. Martin is elected as the new HOA president. The first thing he does? Erase every fraudulent fine. And Linda? She vanishes. Her house foreclosed. Her life in ruins. A week later, I sit on my porch, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. The air is lighter. No more bogus fines. No more threats. No more whispered warnings about who belongs here. James and Celeste wave as they pass by, their kids racing ahead on bikes. Mrs. Patel smiles from her garden. No more violation notices for her flowers. Marcus nods at me from his driveway. No more threats of foreclosure. We took back our home. Carmen steps outside, handing me a cup of tea. She leans against my shoulder. You did it, she murmurs. I glance at the house across the street, the one that used to belong to Linda. It's empty now, overgrown. The for sale sign tilts slightly in the wind. I take a slow sip of my tea. No, I say. We did.